chapter 16, verse 9, it says, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps." And I think that's all of us before we were saved. I think that's characteristic of all of us. We've all had our plans. We all had our own goals and the direction we were going to go until the Lord directed our steps. And I think back to the time before I was saved. I had my plans. I knew what I was doing when I got out of high school. I knew exactly what I was planning to do. I grew up in Johnstown, and when I graduated from high school, Johnstown had an unemployment rate of 23% or something like that, and there were no jobs, and there still aren't in Johnstown. But I joined the Air Force to get out of Johnstown, and I knew exactly where I was going. I went into electronics. My plans were to go into electrical engineering or electronic engineering. And when I got into the Air Force, I got a good first 2 years. I spent almost all my time in school. Towards the end of the first 2 years, about 2 months before the end of those first 2 years, I got permission to go to college full time, and I was going to be able to work, or at my job in the Air Force, I was going to be able to study. So who could ask for more, you know? The Air Force was going to pay my bills, send me to college, and when I went on the job, they were going to let me work, or let me study instead of work. And before the first day of classes, it all changed. In 1965, they asked for 350 volunteers for a special mission. No explanation as to what it was for. They told us nothing about it. They got 348 volunteers. And they volunteered 2 of us. And I was one of the 2 that didn't volunteer. I mean, there were many reasons why I didn't volunteer. I would have been foolish to volunteer for something that would take me out of college after the Air Force agreed to pay for it all. And I didn't. But we left the United States, we packed all of our equipment, and we were headed over the Pacific Ocean. And we had a suspicion about where we were going, and our suspicion was relatively correct. We were going to Southeast Asia, to Vietnam. Not actually into Vietnam, we were going to Thailand. But this was before things really got hot. Vietnam was really unknown at that time, practically. There was, other than a few advisors, no one was in Vietnam from America. And on the way over, while we were in flight, our orders were changed to go to Japan instead of to Thailand, which was really our designated place, as we found out later. And so we stopped in Japan. I was in Japan for about 2 weeks. In the middle of those 2 weeks, we were given, because we were there as a temporary duty, we had no job for those 2 weeks. We had nothing to do. We were given passes to go off base all the time we wanted, as long as we showed up at night to check back in. And I was off the base one evening in the local town, and an American GI came up to me and started witnessing to me. I didn't know him. I didn't know who he was. Some of you know who he is. He's Frank Musk. He's a missionary to Japan today. But after he witnessed to me and really didn't get anywhere, he asked me where I was from, and I told him I was from Johnstown. He said, "Well, I'd like you to meet somebody from your hometown." And he took me to missionary Ron Blau at that time. He was a missionary. Frank Musk was an Air Force GI. He took me to Ron Blau, and because he was from my hometown, I decided to visit his American GI mission work that Sunday. And there were 3 guys that came by my barracks to pick me up. And when they came by, they were surprised because I was ready to go. They had done that many times in the past, and I was the first one that was ever ready to go. The rest had excuses or weren't even there. They disappeared before they got there to pick them up. But I wanted to see, and I believe this explains, in here too, a man's heart deviseth his own way. I wanted to see what a missionary did. I was religious, but I wasn't saved. And I wasn't thoroughly religious, but I was religious. And I always got a real ethereal feeling when I went to church twice a year. But I wanted to see what a missionary did. And I always had envisioned that they helped the poor farmers learn how to farm and do all the things that we see with the liberal religious work that goes on in the world. And anyway, he preached a message. The church, the total number of people in the church was probably about 30 to 35. It was a Quonset hut. I don't know if any of you know what a Quonset hut is. It looks like a half a barrel. It's just a round building. It was probably as wide as this, but the ceiling was very low. And the church was meeting in a Quonset hut in a farmer's field in Japan. And he preached a message, and at the end he gave an invitation for people to raise their hand if they wanted to be saved. Well, I never opened up my eyes. That would have been very sinful to do that. But I raised my hand, and I had envisioned that every single person in that church had to have their hand up. And I was the only one. Everyone else, except for maybe the smallest children, were already professing Christians in that church. And I raised my hand, and he requested that maybe I come forward and talk to him, which I didn't do. But he invited me to spend the day with him at his home that day. And I spent the day with him, and what I saw was the gospel being lived out. And that night, he preached another message, which he gave an invitation for. And he did talk to me, and I made a profession of faith, but I'm sure it wasn't genuine. It was like, get off my back. I mean, I was halfway serious about it, but I was just interested in getting out of a tough situation. But then I began to read the Gospel of John, or I should say 1 John, and got severely convicted of sin. In the middle of that week, at my bed in my barracks, I believe is where I was saved. And the Lord just changed so much of my life. He changed my direction. He changed my plans. Things were just different. And my desires were different. He changed my interests. And I wound up at Bob Jones University, and that's where I met Susan, and I'm very thankful that we met. And I'm thankful for my family. I'm just thankful that the Lord